the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, episode 90.
Welcome to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R2 Global.
Welcome to another edition of the Global Energy Leaders Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Ray. So good to have you today. And on today's episode, we bring on Paige Wilson, who is the host of the Oil and Gas Industry Leaders Podcast. It is a great show. Paige does a great job. And as I say, in my opinion, she's the Rookie of the Year or Rising Star or whatever you want to say. As far as oil and gas podcast goes, her show is just doing big numbers and has on some of the best names in the industry. So really was honored for her to give me a few minutes of her time and come on the show. If you haven't checked it out, be sure we will link to her show and everything we can find about the Oil and Gas Global Network in the show notes at globalenergymedia.com. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Paige Wilson. Well, if there was a Rookie of the Year or Rising Star or podcast most likely to reach to the top, I think it would be your show, Paige. It is blowing up, and it's an honor to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. Thank you for having me.
Well, so I met you, I guess, maybe about a year ago through our mutual friend, Mark LaCour, and I know you've been in the oil and gas business, with API Young Professionals and just various things, and now you've got this show that's just really, really doing well, which is exciting to see. So what got you, let's just step back here, what got you interested in oil and gas and kind of in the industry?
Well, I'm third generation oil and gas from Crowley, Louisiana, and my grandfather worked with National out in the Sahara Desert. So my dad and my aunts grew up in Malta. And so my dad started with Nexen in 1981, and then they were purchased by CNOG, and then no longer able to operate in the United States. So he got on with Wood Group, PSN, and is currently out on Mississippi Canyon 736A Thunderhawk working for Noble Energy. And so it's been in my life for so long, I never knew life without oil and gas. And so I took a job. A friend of mine said they were hiring as a land admin assistant for Meritech Resources about 10 years ago. And tried that out, wasn't really my thing. And then I got into regulatory compliance. So that's majority of my background.
Regulatory compliance, that is one of those jobs that I just don't think I could last that very long. I'm sure you have a lot of bizarre and interesting stories, and I don't want to get into that, but just for some of the listeners, we have a very diverse energy professional group that listen to our show. What are some of the things that maybe you would just throw out there as someone who's been in regulatory that you see that people make mistakes, that they go, okay, you know what, if you would just clean this up, if you'd look at this, maybe a couple things that for people who are in that part of the business that you could lend some advice to?
Yeah, well, you definitely have to have patience. And you're a communicator between your company as representative of your company to the government. So I guess my piece of advice would be, especially for the operator, to do it right the first time. I guess another thing would be treat everybody fairly and respectfully. That's something, and that's more than just regulatory compliance. But I mean, you have to make friends with, those of the government, or be friendly, not necessarily make friends, but be friendly with them and communicate. That's a big thing. That's a big thing I saw through all my years. That was probably the more difficult thing to overcome between, regulatory specialists and then the other people of the company.
One of the things I've seen is people kind of with the mindset of, hey, let's ask forgiveness, not permission. And it seems to bite people more often than we actually realize. What's your kind of take on that? You've come from regulatory. Is it better to go ahead and ask for permission first, or it's okay to roll the dice and ask for forgiveness later?
Definitely ask for permission first. The one thing about this industry is if you don't follow the rules are in place for a reason, and if you don't follow those rules, bad things can happen. And you know what happens when in the oil field, people can die. They're there for a reason. Be respectful. So yeah, that's pretty much my take on it.
So you're in regulatory compliance, and then now you're the host of one of the most top trending shows, at least in our space, in energy and oil and gas specifically. What made you transition from regulatory compliance to being a podcast host?
Well, due to the nature of the upstream sector, I was laid off March 2016, and I had already been volunteering as project manager for all the podcasts, so I had that in my pocket, and then everybody was just so awesome with API YP and letting me in and helping me network. I guess I had done so much volunteer work for OGGN, and Mark LaCour decided, hey, I have a great idea for a show, but I want you to be the host of it. And I said, I don't know about that. Let me think about it. And so he twisted my arm, and I think we started that process last December. So we're coming up on a year of developing the show. So it's definitely it's not anything I ever thought I would do. That's for sure.
Right, and real quick, just for the listener standpoint who may not be familiar with the Oil and Gas Global Network, how many different shows you can have? I think in 4 off the top of my head, but there may be more than that. I know you got your show. Mark's got a couple of shows. Is it 3 or 4 shows that you guys currently have?
We've launched 3 thus far. We have so many 3 officially launched, but there's more. I think we may release a couple more by year's end.
Okay, just for the listeners, we're going to call those out real quick. We got the Oil and Gas Leaders Podcast, Industry Leaders Podcast, which you host. You got Oil and Gas This Week with Mark LaCour, Jake's going to, and then Jake Corley, thank you, and then you get the H&E, the HS&E podcast that they also do. So those three, okay. And so let's talk about your show. One of the things I love about this podcast is you get to just come on and you get to have a discussion with people. And our scope's a little bit broader than yours. Obviously, you're focused on old people, which is great. I love it. But you get to learn from people in a setting that maybe that you wouldn't normally learn from. You get to sit back and you go, okay, hey. Person, you're an expert, you're a subject matter expert on this topic, and you get to really sit back and kind of pick their brain. And I found it to be especially helpful, not only in the sense of how I think about energy as it affects the world, but how I think about my business as well, because you get to talk to people who attack business different ways. They have different perspectives. So what has been your biggest takeaway from interviewing people on your show?
My favorite part would probably be the intimacy. It's very, I get to hear their story. I get to feel that ambiance of, this is what I went through, and that's how I am where I am now. And I like I ask about 5 questions towards the end of each show, and I like the diversity and then the similarities in between those I've interviewed.
Okay, and so when you sit there and you talk to these leaders, what are some of the challenges that you're hearing that are facing the oil and gas industry over the next 5 to 10 years?
I don't think this industry is going to be ready for the technology. It's an industry that doesn't take change very well. All these technologies companies are knowing something's missing and trying to find the answer to it. And with, there's no longer a change crew anymore. You have all of these younger people coming in. And I might be young in age, but I've been in the industry for quite some time, and I don't consider myself in that realm. But I think it's the transitioning also of, all of the older people leaving, being laid off, so on and so forth, and then new people coming in and trying to do it a different way.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been in the business for, I think it's 2005, so 12 years now. And, you sit back and you go, okay, well, I'm only 32. I'm still relatively young. I think I'm young at least. But, there's plenty of 32-year-olds who are just getting into the business. And so being 32 in the business...
I'm older than you.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
I didn't realize I was older than you.
Well, I didn't know it, and I wasn't going to say it. So, but but being 32 in the business, I feel like I'm 47 sometimes. Because when you go through, I've been through the first gas show boom, and then the latest oil boom, and so it ages you. So we have a lot of old souls in the business that are in their 30s. Is what I was trying to get to, but I still feel young. But you're right, that crew change is going on. It is interesting because I think as far as the business goes, we need to do a good job of branding people as thought leaders and exciting people to follow. If you look at tech, you look at other industries, there's exciting people to follow. And in oil and gas, we really don't have that. That's one thing I love about with your show. You're highlighting people who are in the business who have really kind of reached the pinnacle, and they can sit back and kind of give this younger audience encouragement on how to walk their journey, because everyone's journey, if you talk to people in the oil and gas business, it's all different, but it's all, on some level, it's the same. They went through, there's a lot of ups and downs, a lot of hard times, a lot of wide swings in the economy that they had to go to. They had to do some traveling. And so there's some camaraderie that you can build by listening to people like you're going to bring on your show. And so I love that aspect of it. Do you think that you said that the industry struggles to change, but with a young influx of people, will they be able to turn that tide in the next 10 years? Or do you think that it's just kind of built in the culture, and that's a long-term process before we can get that out?
I think it would work. I think it's gonna take a little while, maybe 10 years. Yeah, maybe 10 years. It's gonna be lengthy, because in this industry, everybody, when you love oil and gas, you love oil and gas. And people come out of retirement, they contract, they work, they want to still be part of it, and it'll probably take a decade or so.
Right. So Paige, I have to ask you, Mark was kind of one of the reasons I started doing my show, and now I've got a couple. And I enjoy doing it. I really love doing it. But Mark is, I call him the godfather of energy podcasts, because he kind of is the guy who has forged the way for the rest of us. And so it's got to be just a real honor and pleasure just to get to work with him on a daily basis.
Well, and he's kind of an unofficial mentor, but I mean, he's, between the four of us, we've all become very close. And it's been a pleasure working with all three of them. Patrick, Pester, Jake Corley. I think when I first met him, I was just kind of like in awe, but no, he's a great guy, and he's doing amazing stuff,
Well, I think one of the things that, and maybe it was you that pointed out one time, we were at a meeting with Mark, and someone walked up and they go, "Hey, Mark, I do so and so, and I'm looking for such and such." He goes, "Hold on a second." And he walks them across the room. He's like, "Hey, you need to talk to this person." He knows everyone, and he knows what they do. He's got an incredible memory, and so it's amazing.
Yes, he knows everybody. I remember, I forget which conference we were at. Maybe it was Summer Nape. No, maybe it was the Winter Nape, the summit. We were walking by, and somebody just heard his voice and just like jumped out of a crowd and was like, "That's Mark LaCour." And it scared me a little bit, but I got over it. It's pretty typical. Yeah, everybody knows him.
Yeah, so at Summer Nape, I was there. We saw each other, and I walked past the booth, and they go, "Hey, you're the podcast guy." And that's the first time anyone has ever called me that. I'm like, "Oh, right, I'm being noticed and recognized." I'm like, "This is awesome. You listen to the show?" He goes, No, you came by at the first Nape, and I remember you. I was like, "Oh." So that was my time. I thought that someone had actually recognized me for the podcast. No, it was just I'd pestered him at the first time at the spring Nape.
Oh, that's good.
I don't get people like LaCour hopping over tables and stuff. I don't have that kind of recognition. So But you're right. Anytime you're around with him in
Yeah.
public, it's crazy. He's like a rock star in our industry. It's quite impressive. Okay, well, look, I've wanted to get you on mainly just because I'm envious of how awesome your show is and how great it's doing. But no, I want to let my listeners know about your show, what you have going on at the Oil and Gas Global Network. Obviously, we've had on Mark a few times. He will be coming back on again for episode 100. And so let's just kind of recap what you guys have, where people can find it in the shows, and obviously your show, which is the Oil and Gas Industry Leaders Podcast. So kind of break that down for the listeners, and we will tag all that stuff in the show notes.
Okay, so we have oilandgasglobalnetwork.com. That's where you get all of our, whatever we have going on, all the podcasts listed. And then we have a LinkedIn group, and just look us up, OGGN. And then my website is oilandgasindustryleaders.com. And I can also be found on LinkedIn, Tabitha Paige Wilson. And yeah, that's pretty right now. And because of the hurricane, we also have a GoFundMe to help with the restoration for everybody that's lost basically everything. GoFundMe.com/Harvey-restoration. And that's about it.
Okay, well, we will link to that. I'll look offline to see when that campaign expires and make sure it will be it will still be going by the time this airs. And if so, we will definitely link to that because that's a worthy cause. And in the meantime, we'll be sharing it on social media. So just in case that campaign runs out by the time this podcast airs, our listeners can have a chance to go and check that out. Well, look, Paige, it was so good to talk to you. And really, I'm so excited for your show. I love listening to it. I love the format. I love the whole thing. I love hearing from the guest. It's really great. It's really well done. It's a great production. And so just wanted to bring you on, let the listeners hear about your show, which, I mean, obviously I'm kind of like the small fry here compared to you, but it's an honor to have you on, and I really appreciate your time today.
Oh, don't do that to yourself. You've got what, 2 podcasts out right now? I think, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm subscribed to both of them. You're doing really great too, man.
I got 3 podcasts out. 3. I just started my 3rd.
Goodness, where do you find time for all of this?
I'm a vampire. I don't really sleep or something like that. So no, I got a good team that helps me, and getting people on like yourself makes it really easy because you guys do all the heavy lifting. I got to think of some questions that halfway make sense, and you guys do the rest of the work, and then it's putting it together. So no, I got 3, and we're trying to chug away over here on our end of the thing. And one of the things we talked about at NAPE, and this is what I love about where we're at, is that Oil and Gas Global Network, Global Energy Media, from our perspectives, this is all good. It's good to have you guys out there. You guys are doing your thing. We're doing our thing. And so we love to bring you guys on the show and let our listeners hear about it because you guys have a lot of good content.
Well, and that's the best part about all of this. And we don't really see each other as competition because we're not. It's about creating good content for the audience. And that's why I love doing this so much.
Yeah, and if we were competition, you'd be killing me. And I will let you go with that because you have been spectacular with your time, and I really appreciate you coming on the show today. And we look forward to getting you on again in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thanks for listening to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.